As we do continue along, another edition of the YouTube Roundtable, and I bring back some very interesting colleagues and guests that talk all kinds of things, but specifically, we've been touching on the Masters. We've got the NFL draft coming up. Who better to help me out? First of all, from SiriusXM's PGA Tour Radio and his own golf podcast, but also huge sports fan out of Indianapolis. We will definitely have to squeeze in a Colts comment or question, I'm sure, at some point with one Will Haskett. Brother Haskett, how you feeling here on this edition of the Three Dog Thursday Roundtable on YouTube?
Good. We can go any direction you want. I mean, hell, I was doing axe throwing while the final round of the Masters was going on ESPN. So I am not a one-trick pony. You know that.
I did see some social media axe throwing from you, and that says a lot about you. It says a lot about this man, Luke Easterling, that he's willing to give me a few minutes, because as I joked with him before I pushed the record button, you're usually like shoulder deep or neck deep into the NFL draft by now. He said, no. I stay shoulder deep or eyeball deep into the NFL draft. From the USA Today Draft Wire site, here is Luke Easterling with me here on the podcast to set us kind of straight on the NFL draft. Good to have you, sir.
My pleasure, TJ. Always a good time, man.
And look at Easterling, who lives in the Tampa Bay area, for those seeing him on the YouTube Roundtable, rocking the Lightning hat and the Lightning shirt for the defending Stanley Cup champs. I mean, Haskett, you just have to tolerate the fact that Kucherov, yes, and we haven't even seen him yet. You have to tolerate the fact that we are Tampa Bay. Will Haskett, and for the audience on YouTube, the Buccaneers with the Super Bowl win in January, the Lightning before that, the Stanley Cup, the defending American League champion Rays raised the banner last Friday at the time that we're doing this show. On Monday, they handed out the American League championship rings. It's Tampa Bay through and through, and Luke's based here in the Bay Area with us. All right, so let's get to it. I'm going to share the screen again for the YouTube audience. Again, if you're only hearing us on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, on Google Podcast, wherever you hear Three Dog Thursday through the Sports Gambling Podcast network of shows, come find the YouTube, because you're going to hear me make site references, photos, whatever, analysis. Come see us. See what we look like on YouTube. With that being said, Mr. Haskett, Bonsai, Hideki Matsuyama becomes the first ever Japanese golfer to win any male major, obviously the first ever to win the Masters. You are perfect to give us some insight into how big of a deal this was at Augusta last week. Sir, go.
Yeah, and it was a sweep. Don't forget that the Augusta Women's National Amateur event was the weekend before, won by a young Japanese lady. So the entire country is buzzing with the Japanese sweep of the championships through the course of that week. And for Hideki, I mean, he's so good at being quiet. It's just who he is. It's his personality. He's kept his life pretty private, not just here in the United States, but also to the Japanese media that are all over him. I mean, no one has more media responsibilities on the PGA Tour than Hideki Matsuyama, and that includes any player. I mean, you throw any player out there, he's the only guy who has to do media, whether he shot 80 or 60 at the end of a round. And we just don't see that typically throughout the course of it. And so it was huge, because it will obviously take a little bit of a monkey off his back. He's still 29 years old. I think people don't realize how young he still is, because he's been relevant for the last decade. But he was kind of an afterthought going into the week, and has been for the last year or so, really since the pandemic hit. And so for him to kind of reassert how good of a player he was on the short list of best players in terms of talent, not to win a major over the last couple of years. And for him to finally get that, we can talk all we want about marketing dollars back in Japan and what that means for him. And obviously it is huge for him, for the country that is crazed about the sport and crazed about golf in general. But I think more importantly, it's that we remember with the win just how good he has been for the last 10 years, and how good he could still be for the next 10 years, because he has a weapon with his irons that is really unmatched by maybe just a handful of guys in professional golf. And so if this just gives him the belief to be able to do it again, if you told me at the beginning of the year that Hideki Matsuyama would be a multiple major winner, I'd be like, oh yeah, I forgot about Hideki. Now he's won one. It's like, oh yeah, you know what? He probably should win multiple major championships before it's all said and done.
All right, more on that in a second, because the PGA Championship will be in the next one in the chronology in May, and then the U.S. Open will be in June. I will jokingly say, and Luke, stand by. Luke's not as big a golf guy. I promise we're coming with plenty of draft. Hang in there. The last time Easterling was on the course, it was probably more enjoyable for the beverages than the golf shots in the drink or in the woods.
The
right?
golf cart. It's all about driving the golf cart, man.
Driving the golf cart and trying to break traffic laws while you're at it. But one more on this, Will, for the audience here, because you have great insight. You and I have both worked together. You've done PGA Tour Radio, probably close to 15 years by now, 10 to 15 years or right around there in and around the PGA Tour. My man Hideki was leaking oil, was leaking transmission fluid, had a wobbly wheel. He put it in the water on 15. He bogeyed 16. He still bogeyed the 18th, missing a putt. We were I was hoping that we would have some drama, but he was able to survive. It was more like survival mode at the end of that Masters, was it not, Will?
Yeah, and he gave himself the ability to be in survival mode. I questioned him going for the green and 2 on 15, but at the same point in time, like, you can make bogey from laying up and then chunking it into the water. So while I would have probably said the better play there was to lay it up, where he ended up putting it over the back of the green, it was going to be really hard for him to make anything worse than a bogey from there. I think the afterthought is that we forget that Xander Schauffele was then right there with the chance to win it, and then rinses on 16. He says he caught it flush and didn't judge the wind right. I just don't know how you can miss it left, so I question that a little bit on where that miss ended up coming, regardless of what he thought the wind was or wasn't doing in the moment. So I think Hideki's sort of leaking oil and then ultimately winning takes away from the fact that there was probably one guy that had a real chance to go out and grab that tournament on the back nine. That wasn't Hideki Matsuyama, and that was Xander, who now has his own sort of narrative surrounding him of, yeah, he's great. He's a top 5 machine, but is there something lacking to get him across the finish line in a tournament? And maybe he's going to eventually get that monkey off his back. But no, I think Hideki bogeyed the first hole. It looked a little shaky. He got it right back on 2. And then for the next 2.5 hours, he was kind of cruising with the lead. And he gave himself the ability to make a couple of mistakes coming down the stretch. And no one else really hard was going to make a super run at him. And so the one guy that had a chance to do it was right there alongside him, and he hit first on 16. And if Xander put that somewhere on the green, then who knows where Hideki's mind is. But guess what? Xander did. He put it in the water, and Hideki Matsuyama at that point in time had one arm in the jacket.
There is no doubt. And that green jacket, it will be interesting. You're only allowed to walk around with it for a year. Will it be at the Olympics? Will he be at the forefront? You would have to think, because golf is in the Olympics. Will he be at the forefront for the Japanese delegation? Will he light the torch in the green jacket? That might happen. Can't light the green jacket on fire. We don't want to do that from the Masters. So plenty of golf talk. And again, because this is Three Dog Thursday, I got one more with Will, and I promise we're moving to NFL draft conversation. As I share the screen, the odds are up here for the upcoming PGA Championship in May. Kiawah Island, right off the coast of the Carolinas, is where they will play it. Dustin Johnson is from there. Dustin Johnson, who missed the cut at the Masters, is 11-1. Interesting, as we look on the screen for the YouTube audience, that even with the win, Hideki Matsuyama is still 27-1 to win that one. Bryson DeChambeau's odds are better. Justin Thomas's odds, Jordan Spieth's odds. Will, I know you go into the foray of daily fantasy and the betting angle and stuff with golf. Does it surprise you Matsuyama is 27-1 a month from now?
No, because again, I think if you just look at the whole body of work over the last year or so, that's kind of where he slides in terms of talent. And we'll question his putter a little bit. So there are some areas of his game that I don't think will ever make him a favorite over a DJ, a JT, a Rahm, some of those guys. Now, DJ isn't playing very well right now. We'll see what he does this week at the RBC Heritage in Harbortown, which isn't a great golf course fit for him. But we'll see if he can figure out his putter and a few things that have held him back over the last couple of months. But I think if you look at the list of the most talented guys who haven't won a major, Jon Rahm is probably next. If it gets to blowing and it's really hard there on the Atlantic coast, he plays really hard golf courses really well. And Rory won the last time we were at Kia. It was a long time ago. It was 9 years ago. He won by 8. Rory is a shell of himself right now. He's lost, a new swing coach, trying to figure things out. So a lot of guys at the top of the sport are kind of sputtering a little bit right now. It's not 10 deep in the top 10 in the world. It's really 4 or 5 guys that are playing at a major championship quality level, which could change in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I would say it's probably JT and Rahm out of that favorite list. And then there's a lot more value in the 40 to 50 to 1 range, in my opinion, than looking at the top of that list when you're looking at bets.
Very interesting. All right. Again, we've dominated this with golf talk. It's been a table for 2 on the round table. Let's make it a table for 3 and Luke Easterling and bring him in. Here we go. My man is ready for this. As we take a look on the YouTube roundtable, the draft now just a couple of weeks away. Again, a 3-night event. And all the debate about the quarterbacks beyond Trevor Lawrence, who's going to go 1, as Luke is going to talk to us about, to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Beyond that, what happens with the Jets at 2? And now it's the San Francisco 49ers who've traded with the Dolphins to be in the 3 spot, followed by the Falcons and the Bengals. So, Luke Easterling, to you first. The intrigue at the pictures that we're showing here of the different quarterbacks of somebody like a Justin Fields, Ohio State, somebody like a Mac Jones, Alabama, somebody like a Zach Wilson, of BYU, all the quarterbacks at the top. That's where this is all kind of interesting for what the Jets do at 2 after the Jaguars, what the 49ers do at 3, et cetera, et cetera. That's what we're focusing on, right, Luke?
It is, and that's the case every year, right? The draft conversation starts with whatever the top quarterbacks are, whoever they are, however many of them you have. I think what makes this year interesting is not only do we expect at this point that 3 quarterbacks will come off the board in the first 3 picks, we've got a really decent shot that we go 4 for 4, whether it's Atlanta picking at 4 or somebody else moving up to trade up. That's something we've never seen before. We've never seen 4 quarterbacks in the top 4 picks. But I think the interesting part in that for this class is you might actually have 4 guys who are worth it. And that's extremely rare. There's a reason you don't see 4 guys going in the 4 picks. Is that usually by the time you get to the 2nd or 3rd quarterback, the 4th quarterback, there's a drop off. You get to that next tier of guys where it's like, we'll wait, late 1st round, 2nd round, we'll see. But this year you could make a really strong case. Obviously Trevor Lawrence is going number 1, but once you get to 2, I'm a big Justin Fields fan. I think he should be the number 2 pick. I think he's been the second best quarterback in this class since May, and I think he would be the number 1 overall pick in any other draft that doesn't have a Trevor Lawrence in it. But I get why people like Zach Wilson from BYU. I get why people like Trey Lance from North Dakota State. Again, a guy who doesn't have a lot of starting experience, didn't do it at the highest level of competition. But when you look at physically what he can do, and also the reports you hear about how smart the kid is and how well he understands the game, you could make a case for him too, especially if you're a team like Atlanta or even San Francisco, where you've got a veteran who's going to be around for at least 1 more year. If with Atlanta, maybe 2, because they're going to be paying, I think the dead cap number for Matt Ryan for 2022 is in the $40 million range. So even if they wanted to go quarterback, they're going to be paying him a lot of money for a little while now. But I think the interesting thing is, where does Mac Jones fit here? Because once the trade happened with San Francisco, that's when Mac Jones went from maybe he goes to New England at 15, maybe he goes to Pittsburgh at 24, one of these maybe playoff teams that could use a guy to upgrade, or maybe in the future. After that trade happened, it became, wow, he's the perfect fit for Kyle Shanahan. Maybe he's the number 3 pick. And that train really hasn't slowed down much. We saw the fact that the 49ers are going to be heavily involved in those second pro days for Fields and Lance. So that maybe threw a little bit of water on that they're zeroing in on Mac Jones. But man, it's just a fun, any draft where you get to talk this much about so many good quarterback prospects before you even get to any other position, you obviously know it's going to be a really fun class to deal with.
All right, let me show the audience on the YouTube roundtable, because you love to answer fan questions on social media at Luke Easterling. And looky here, Luke Easterling put this out on social media earlier in the week when someone was asking about Mac Jones. You said, I see Kirk Cousins. I'm saying this for the audience that can't read the tweet because they're only hearing us. I see Kirk Cousins or Jimmy G ceiling for Mac Jones, the Alabama quarterback. That's a day 2 prospect for me. You don't believe he's even 1st round worthy, the Bama quarterback.
Well, and this gets into the difference between grading a player in a vacuum, right, and like assigning a grade or a round to him, and also understanding that quarterbacks are too valuable, and just because you have a 2nd round grade on a guy doesn't mean he's going to get that far. If you think a quarterback's worth a 2nd round pick, you have to spend a 1st to get him. That's just the way it works. It's too important of a position. So when I say he's a day 2 prospect, that means he comes out with a 2nd round grade for me. But that means if I'm Pittsburgh at 24, if I'm New Orleans at 28, if I'm one of those teams, Tampa Bay at 32, if they wanted to go that route, that's where I see a guy like that slotted, because I see, again, Kirk Cousins and Jimmy G as a ceiling is not bad. That's a quality starter at the next level, and that's extremely valuable at that position. You saw that with the value that the Matthew Stafford trade generated, right? For an above average starter in this league, you got to pay up. So when I say he's a day 2 prospect, that's just in a vacuum relative to everyone else in this draft class. And I think that's where people get hung up sometimes, is like the way we evaluate players in the media and the way in which 32 very different franchises evaluate and stack their boards based on their very specific needs and schemes and wants, and the way, and obviously things that we don't know, medical evaluations that the media doesn't see, interviews behind the scenes that the media is not a part of. There's all those things that we can't even know about. So the quarterback position is so important that just because he's a second round player for me doesn't mean I think he's not worthy of a first round pick. It's just once you get in the conversation of him over Justin Fields, him over Trey Lance, I'm like, okay, now it's too rich for me.
Love it. Again, love the insight of Luke Easterling. Will Haskett with me. Just a couple of more moments here. Will wants to know, because Indianapolis now gets the quarterback with Carson Wentz, and you're a Colts guy, you're in Indianapolis. I see the Butler hat on the head of Will Haskett as well, Indy through and through. That marriage is interesting. What are the Colts maybe looking at here? Just do that for Will here real quick. Luke, what do you like for the Colts later on in this first round?
Well, I think the tough thing for the Colts is it's really hard to replace your starting left tackle when he retires. So that's obviously I think the biggest need, especially when you bring in a quarterback who was really banged up and took a lot of hits in Philadelphia. And I think that really didn't help with Carson Wentz's growth and his ability to live up to those expectations of being a number 2 pick. So when I look at trying to make him successful, I look at the fact that Anthony Costanzo's not there anymore. And I'm like, well, that's the first thing I got to do. The good thing for the Colts here is that this offensive tackle class is fantastic. It is extremely deep. It's got 2 or 3 guys you could make a case could be the best of the first one off the board, but also a lot of guys that I really like. They're picking 21 right now. A lot of guys I like in that range. Tevin Jenkins from Oklahoma State, Alex Leatherwood from Alabama, Dylan Radins from North Dakota State, Liam Eichenberg from Notre Dame. So many guys that if any of those 4 or 5 or 6 guys are on the board and they take him, I think it's going to be a win for them. So a lot of good options there for them.
Love it. Will Haskett, are you on board? Are you on the Carson Wentz train here? I mean, you love this. You're on the train here for him?
Well, any train with a serviceable quarterback was going to be a good train for the Colts to have after Phillip Rivers retired. You can get a serviceable left tackle in the first round. That will make this city very, very happy. Although you're starting to see more and more talk about edge rush because that is a need playing defense. But it's hard for me to see them going past the 21st pick without addressing the gaping hole at left tackle. Because if you don't have that, you just bring the demons back potentially for Carson Wentz. So I'd be shocked even if 4 or 5 of those tackles are off the board. They may have to make a pivot and a move and trade back. But yeah, I'd be shocked if that first pick isn't an offensive tackle.
Well, Will, one thing I would say also is that I think the important thing for them at 21 to take a tackle is that if you look past 21, in between 21 and that second round pick, a ton of teams who need tackles. Yeah. A ton of guys. So if you, like you said, even if you've got the 5th or 6th best guy on your board there, I don't even think that'll end up being a reach because a lot of those tackles are graded in that area. And B, you know that by the time you get into the 50s, all the rest of those guys are gone. So if you like a guy in that range, you got to take him at 21 unless you feel really confident about moving back from 21 or up from that second rounder.
Perfect example. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers zeroed in on the right tackle from Iowa, the all Big Ten tackle Tristan Wirfs, and said, we don't believe he's going to be here later on. We think there are several teams that could grab him. So they zeroed in on him. I think that if I remember correctly, they actually moved up a couple of spots to make sure that they grabbed him.
They gave a 4th round pick to move up 1 spot
because they were that scared he was about to be taken at 15. And I think that pretty well worked out on the right side of the line for the Buccaneers. All right, let me plug one more time for these guys because I've got to get out of here. Hear more and read more from Luke Easterling on USA Today's Draft Wire site. I am showing his social media right here to the YouTube roundtable audience. Take a look and see and find Luke right here. Follow him at the Draft Wire. Also, Luke Easterling, Easterling, Luke Easterling on social media. You also find Will Haskett right here. He was talking about Hideki Matsuyama's win in the Masters on Sirius XM's PGA Tour Radio earlier in the week. There he is calling golf shots on the radio for PGA Tour Radio, looking oh so serious. Also probably blinded by the morning light or the sunset, whichever of the two. Follow him at Will Haskett. Haskett on social media, does a great job. In fact, Will's got to jump off here because he's working this week for the coverage from Hilton Head for the Heritage Classic in Hilton Head. He's got to go do some golf. Luke's got to go write like 5 more nuggets for the draft coverage on Draft Wire. So I think we got all of this from both of you guys. Thank you for hanging with me here on the roundtable. It's great to see both of you. Will, good luck with the golf and more majors coming with the PGA and the U.S. Open and the draft here in 2 weeks, Luke Easterling. I look forward to reading and hearing more all about it. Guys, thank you. I appreciate it.
See ya.
My pleasure, TJ.
There you go. And the podcast rolls on here on Three Dog Thursday. Stay with us.